It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Puris coming to you from Baltimore. Iraq made headlines this past week, first when an American service member was killed on Tuesday just north of Mosul. Then this past weekend, 2 suicide car bombs claimed by the Islamic State killed at least 32 people and injured 75 others in southern Iraq. Then on Saturday, protesters staged a sit-in at the Iraqi parliament in the country's green zone, which is an enclave for U.S. military, Iraqi government offices and embassies. The protesters were demanding political reforms against corruption. These protests were targeting Iraqi Prime Minister al-Abadi, who is trying to appoint technocrats in ministerial positions as an anti-corruption measure. But the Iraqi parliament has been in a deadlock on this issue due to ongoing debate. On to discuss these developments is Sabah Alnasseri. He is Associate Professor and Director of the Graduate Program in Political Science at York University in Canada. Sabah, thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, Sharmini from Toronto.
Sabah, so give us some details as to why these protesters are having a sit-in in Parliament. And I know they have disbanded for the time being, but they have promised to come back.
Yes. Well, these protests started actually last year in July, almost 1 year. And at 3 significant moments ever since these protests started in July. The first one is that the protest movement was spontaneous. It was not organized by a party or a religious movement or a religious figure. It was spontaneous, and people went on the street in different provinces of Iraq, especially in the so-called Shiite majority provinces in Basra and in Najaf, Karbala, Baghdad, etc. And at first, they were asking for better services, for electricity, clean water, etc. It coincided at that time, as you remember, with the protest movement in Beirut for the same reason, against garbage collection, water, electricity, and so on. So it was spontaneous at that time. And at that time, Minister President Abadi promised to introduce reform and to fight corruption and deliver better service to the people. Nothing happened. And the demands of the protesters then escalated from better services to anti-corruption. They wanted reform to get rid of all these corrupt politicians and ministers within the state apparatus. Then, the second significant movement, I would say, the religious and the so-called secular, I mean, I don't use this term secular, it's problematic, but let me just, for the sake of the argument, I would use this term secular. Religious and secular forces within Iraq were forced actually to collaborate, to reapproach each other and side with the protester. That means the second significant movement is not only the protester pushed the government and Minister President Abadi to at least start some or initiate some reform, but they forced all the religious and non-religious political forces in Iraq to come together and side the protester in their demand. The third significant movement in the formation of these protest movement is the non-sectarian, non-ethnic character of these movements. You have forces from al-Sadrist, of Muqtada al-Sadr, the religious figure, but you have even communists among the protesters and liberal, etc. So for the first time since the U.S. occupation of Iraq in 2003, the urban civil character of the Iraqi societies come to the fore against all these religious and sectarian ethno division of the country. And I think it is significant because for the first time, when I was listening to Muqtada al-Sadr's speeches since March 2016, in front of the Green Zone, for the first time, he not only did not differentiate between a Kurd and an Arab, and a Shiite and a Sunni, but for the first time, he made a statement that there is no difference between a religious Iraqi and non-religious Iraqi. And I think this is significant because he realizes that the nature of the Iraqi societies, which is different than, let's say, Iran or Lebanon for that matter, is so heterogeneous. It has such a long history of non-radical, non-extremist, non-religious, mostly civil urban character that this is the only way forward against the entrenched interests of corrupt political parties and politicians. These are three significant movements, and I think they can help us understand that why, for instance, for the first time, the protesters were actually protected by the Sadrist militias. This is the first time you have such a massive mass movement in Iraq, probably since 1958, since the revolution in Iraq, where the militias of the political parties and the interior ministry didn't dare shoot at the people just like they used to do before, because they were protected this time by the Sadrist militia. And the second thing, which also indicate a cracks within the security apparatus of the state, is that when the people tore down these concrete walls, which reminds me, by the way, of 1989 in Germany, when people tore down the wall between East and West, the similar movement happens in Baghdad last week. So when people tore down these concrete walls, the security forces, not only, especially the police, not only did not stop them or shoot at them, they de facto supported them to enter the parliament, occupy the parliament, and other offices of the ministers and the MP. This is significant. When you have a crack within security apparatus, think about Tunisia and Egypt when the army refused to shoot at the people and so on. It was significant that it contributed to the momentum of the protest movement.
Right, Sabah, there's a lot to be discussed here, particularly Muqtada al-Sadr and his backstory in terms of why most of the reporting that has been taking place on what happened in terms of this sit-in, a lot of the media outlets reported that this was enticed by him and a speech he gave, quite contrary to what you're saying. But we would like to have a backstory on who he is, but let's do that in our second segment, entitle people to continue to listen to us. Thank you so much for joining us, Sabah.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us. Please come back to part 2 with Sabah Alnasseri.